The Anderson family mansion stood like a fortress of wealth on Mulberry Hill, its windows ablaze with golden light against the December snow. Inside, the grand drawing room glittered with expensive ornaments, crystal angels from Austria, hand-blown glass baubles from Italy, and a 12-foot Norwegian spruce draped in silk ribbons that cost more than most people's monthly rent. Margaret Anderson surveyed her domain with satisfaction. Everything was perfect, as it always was for the annual Anderson Christmas Eve gathering. The caterers had outdone themselves with the spread: lobster thermidor, prime rib, caviar, and champagne that cost $300 a bottle. Her children, Victoria, 32, and Christopher, 29, lounged on the velvet sofas with their respective spouses, all designer-clad and dripping with jewelry that caught the firelight. "Mother, you've truly outdone yourself this year," Victoria drawled, adjusting her Cartier bracelet. "Though I do hope we won't have to endure another year of that dreadful fruitcake from Aunt Mee." The room erupted in cruel laughter. "Oh God, don't remind me," Christopher groaned, loosening his Hermes tie. Last year's gift was that hand-knitted scarf that looked like a cat had unraveled it. Jennifer used it to dust the furniture. His wife Jennifer giggled behind her wine glass. "Well, it was the only thing it was good for. The colors were absolutely hideous. Mustard yellow and brown? Who combines those?" Margaret's lips curved into a thin smile, though something uncomfortable flickered in her chest. "Now, children, Mee is family. She's my late husband's sister. After all." "A sister who lives in that run-down cottage on the wrong side of town," Victoria's husband Richard added. "I drove past it once. The paint is peeling, and the garden is completely overgrown. How she manages to survive on that pittance of a pension is beyond me." "Barely surviving, from what I hear," Victoria said, examining her manicured nails. "I saw her at the grocery store last month, using coupons and counting out exact change. It was rather embarrassing, actually. I pretended not to see her." Margaret felt that uncomfortable sensation again, like a stone settling in her stomach, but she pushed it away. She had worked hard to climb to this position in society after her husband's death. Henry had left her well provided for, but maintaining their status required constant vigilance. Associating too closely with poor relations could damage one's reputation. The doorbell chimed, a melodious sound that echoed through the marble foyer. "That'll be the Hendersons," Margaret said, rising gracefully. "Victoria, do check on the wine selection. Make sure James knows to serve the Dom Perignon." But it wasn't the Hendersons. When Margaret opened the door, she found Aunty Mee standing on the threshold, snowflakes settling on her threadbare coat. The coat had once been navy blue, Margaret remembered, but years of wear had faded it to a dull gray. Mee's shoes were scuffed. Her gloves had holes in the fingertips, and her silver hair was covered by a simple knit hat that had clearly seen better days. "Margaret," Mee said softly, her weathered face breaking into a warm smile. "Merry Christmas." "Mee, you're early." Margaret's voice was cool, her eyes darting to the street to see if any neighbors were watching. "The party doesn't start for another hour." "Oh, I know. I just wanted to give you this before the others arrived." Mee held out a package wrapped in plain brown paper, tied with simple twine. Her hands trembled slightly. Whether from cold or age, Margaret couldn't tell. Margaret took the package reluctantly, as if it might contaminate her. You didn't have to bring anything. Of course I did. It's Christmas. Me's eyes, pale blue and kind, searched Margaret's face. May I come in? Just for a moment? Margaret hesitated, then stepped aside with obvious reluctance. Me entered the foyer, her worn shoes squeaking slightly on the polished marble. She gazed around at the opulent decorations, the chandelier dripping with crystals, the grand staircase adorned with garlands of real pine and white roses. You've made it so beautiful, Me said wistfully. Henry would have loved this. At the mention of her late husband's name, Margaret's expression softened fractionally. Yes, well, I do my best. From the drawing room came the sound of laughter, loud, wine-fueled, and sharp. Me's smile faltered slightly. I won't keep you, she said quietly. I just wanted to make sure you got your gift, and to say that I miss you all. It's been quite lonely since Henry passed. Something in her voice, a tremor of genuine sorrow, made Margaret look at her properly for the first time in years. Me had aged considerably. Her face was lined with deep wrinkles, her shoulders stooped. She looked thin, almost frail, under that shabby coat. Yes, well, Margaret said briskly, shaking off the moment of sympathy. Thank you for the gift. I'll add it to the pile. Will you open it tonight? Me asked hopefully. With the family? Margaret glanced at the brown package in her hands. Of course. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have guests arriving soon. Of course. I understand. Me turned toward the door, then paused. Margaret, if you ever need anything, if any of you need anything, I may not have much, but my door is always open. After Me left, Margaret stood in the foyer for a long moment, staring at the simple package. Then she heard Victoria's voice from the drawing room. Mother? Was that Aunty Me? Please tell me she's not staying for dinner. Margaret plastered on her social smile and returned to the party, tossing the brown package onto a side table already piled with elaborately wrapped gifts. The evening progressed with champagne toasts, expensive appetizers, and the arrival of the Hendersons, the Wainwrights, and the Carmichaels, all families of similar wealth and status. The conversation flowed around stock portfolios, luxury vacations, and the shortcomings of various service staff. By 10 o'clock, most of the guests had left, and only family remained. They gathered around the massive tree to exchange gifts, a ritual Margaret insisted upon despite the late hour. Christopher passed out presents with theatrical flourishes. There were designer handbags, luxury watches, silk ties, expensive perfumes. Each gift was met with squeals of delight or satisfied nods of approval. Mother, this is exquisite, Victoria gasped, holding up a pair of diamond earrings. Tiffany's? Naturally, Margaret replied, pleased. Finally, Christopher reached the bottom of the pile. He picked up the brown package, wrinkling his nose. What on earth is this? It looks like it was wrapped in grocery bags. Oh, God, Jennifer moaned. That must be from Aunty Me. The room went silent for a moment, then erupted in laughter. Please tell me you're joking, Victoria said, wiping tears of mirth from her eyes. After last year's disaster, she actually had the audacity to bring another gift? Open it, Chris, Richard urged, grinning. Let's see what treasure awaits us this year. Christopher held the package at arm's length, as if it might explode. Should we take bets? I'm guessing another tragic attempt at knitting. Maybe socks this time. Or potholders, Jennifer suggested. Made from those terrible acrylic yarns that melt if you actually use them. Perhaps it's fruitcake, Victoria added. That awful dense brick she brought 5 years ago. I think ours is still in the garage, perfectly preserved for the archaeological record. They all laughed again, cruel and bright in the golden light. Margaret felt that uncomfortable sensation return, stronger now. Perhaps we should just— No, Mother, Christopher insisted. Let's see what poor Aunty Me has bestowed upon us this year. He tore open the brown paper with exaggerated ceremony, revealing a simple shoebox. The laughter intensified. A shoebox, Victoria cried. Oh, this is too much. What did she do? Gift us her old shoes? But Christopher had opened the box, and his expression changed. The laughter died in his throat. What is it? Jennifer leaned over. Her face went pale. Victoria stood up, wobbling slightly on her heels. What's in the box? Christopher's hands were shaking as he lifted out the contents. It wasn't knitting. It wasn't fruitcake. It was a stack of envelopes. Dozens of them, bound with a faded ribbon. They're letters, he said quietly. Margaret's heart began to pound. What kind of letters? With trembling fingers, Christopher opened the first envelope. It was addressed to the Anderson family in elegant, old-fashioned script. He began to read aloud, his voice cracking. My dearest family, this Christmas marks another year where I find myself wanting to give you something meaningful, but having so little to offer. As I sat in my small cottage last week, trying to decide what I could possibly give to people who have everything, I realized that perhaps the greatest gift I could offer is the truth. Inside this box, you will find letters. Letters I have kept for 25 years since my brother Henry's death. He made me promise to keep them safe, to hold them until the time was right. I believe that time is now. Christopher paused, his face ashen. He reached for the next envelope with shaking hands. This one was addressed to Margaret in different handwriting that made Margaret gasp. That's Henry's handwriting, she whispered. Christopher opened it and began to read. My darling Margaret, if you are reading this, then I am gone, and my sister Me has decided you need to know the truth. I am sorry for the deception, my love, but I hope you will understand. When my father died, he left his entire fortune to me, as was tradition for the eldest son. Me received nothing, not a penny, not a property, nothing. Father was cruel in that way, believing women had no need of inheritance, but Me never complained. She congratulated me, hugged me, and told me she was happy for my success. What you never knew, Margaret, is that I couldn't bear the injustice. So I made arrangements. Half of my inheritance, the half that built our fortune, that bought our home, that now sustains you, actually belongs to me. I set up a trust, managed discreetly, that was supposed to pay her monthly, but the lawyer I hired betrayed us both. He embezzled the trust fund and disappeared. By the time I discovered the theft, I was already ill. The cancer had spread too far. I made Me promise not to tell you, not to burden you with guilt while you were grieving. I asked her to keep these letters, to wait until she felt the time was right to reveal the truth. Margaret's hand flew to her mouth. The room was spinning. Christopher's voice had dropped to barely a whisper as he continued reading. Me could have sued. She could have demanded her share of our estate. Instead, she chose to live in poverty rather than burden us with the scandal and financial strain of legal battles. She made this choice out of love for me and love for you and the children. My dying wish is this. Please, my darling, take care of my sister. She gave up everything for us. The letter fell from Christopher's hands. Victoria was crying silently, black mascara streaming down her cheeks. Jennifer had her hand over her mouth, looking like she might be sick. Richard stared at the floor. Margaret couldn't breathe. Memories flooded back. All the times Me had been kind, even as they treated her with disdain. The Christmas gifts, year after year, despite obvious poverty. The gentle inquiries about their well-being. The offers of help, even when she had nothing to give. Christopher was opening more envelopes now, reading with growing horror. December 1998. I saved for 6 months to buy yarn for those scarves. I wanted each of you to have something warm. December 2001. The fruitcake was made with the last of my butter and sugar. I hope you enjoyed it. December 2007. I sold my mother's ring to pay my heating bill this month, but I managed to buy a small ornament for the tree. I hope it brings you joy. December 2015. The cancer has returned. The doctors say treatment might help, but I cannot afford it. I don't want to burden the family. I will manage somehow. December 2018. I see Victoria at the grocery store, but she pretends not to know me. It hurts, but I understand. I look so shabby now. I am ashamed of what I've become. December 2023. Another Christmas alone? I am so very tired and lonely, but I will keep trying. Family is everything. Victoria collapsed onto the sofa, sobbing uncontrollably. Oh God, what have we done? Christopher's face was wet with tears. We mocked her. We threw away her gifts. We treated her like garbage. Margaret sat frozen, the full weight of their cruelty crushing down on her. Me had been entitled to half of everything. This house, the investments, the luxury they'd enjoyed for decades. She could have demanded it, could have torn apart the family with legal battles. Instead, she'd lived in poverty, in loneliness, while they'd laughed at her threadbare clothes and humble gifts. Jennifer picked up another envelope with shaking hands. There's more, she whispered. It was a medical bill. Stage 4, cancer. The treatment cost was astronomical, money Me clearly didn't have. And then a doctor's note dated just 2 weeks ago. Patient has declined further treatment due to financial constraints. Prognosis without treatment, 3 to 6 months. The silence in the room was deafening. Victoria stood abruptly, swaying. We have to go to her, now. We have to. She's dying, Christopher said flatly, his voice breaking. She's dying, and she spent her last money on truth. On giving us the truth instead of medicine. Margaret rose on unsteady legs, her mind reeling. 25 years. 25 years of Me's quiet suffering, of her gentle love, of gifts bought with money scraped together from nothing. And they had mocked her. They had scorned her. They had pretended not to see her. Get your coats, Margaret said, her voice steel despite the tears streaming down her face. All of you. We're going to Me's house. Now. Mother, it's nearly midnight. Now. The drive to Me's cottage was silent except for muffled sobs. The neighborhood was indeed shabby. Small houses with peeling paint, chain-link fences, cars that had seen better days. Margaret had never visited Me here. had never wanted to see how far her sister-in-law had fallen. The cottage was dark when they arrived. For one terrible moment, Margaret feared they were too late, but then she saw a faint light in a back window. She ran to the door, ran, in her expensive heels and designer dress, and pounded on the weathered wood. Me, please, open the door! There was a long pause, then slow footsteps, and the door cracked open. Me stood there in a faded nightgown, her face pale and drawn. She looked even frailer than she had earlier, as if the evening had drained what little strength she had left. Margaret! Her voice was confused, worried. What's wrong? Is everyone all right? The question, her immediate concern for them even now, broke something in Margaret. She fell to her knees on the doorstep, not caring about the dirt and snow, and grasped Me's thin hands. We know, Margaret sobbed. We know everything. The inheritance, the trust, what you sacrificed. Me, forgive us. Please, please forgive us. Me's eyes widened. Behind Margaret, the rest of the family crowded onto the small porch, all of them crying. We're so sorry, Aunt Me, Victoria wept. We were so cruel to you. We mocked your gifts. We treated you like you were nothing when you gave up everything for us. We saw the medical bills, Christopher added, his voice thick with grief. You can't refuse treatment. You can't. We won't let you. Me looked at all of them, her weathered face a mixture of emotions, surprise, sorrow, and something that might have been relief. Slowly, she stepped back and opened the door wider. Come in, she said softly. Come in from the cold. The cottage was tiny, just 3 small rooms, sparsely furnished with threadbare furniture. But it was clean, and despite the poverty, there were touches of beauty. A vase of pine branches on the table, handmade decorations hung with care. A small tree no bigger than a child, decorated with paper ornaments. They sat wherever they could find space, on the worn sofa, the creaky chairs, the floor. And Me, slowly and carefully, told them her story. She spoke of loving her brother, of understanding their father's will, but accepting it with grace. She spoke of Henry's guilt and his generous plan, and the lawyer's betrayal. She spoke of the choice she'd made, to let them keep their life, their reputation, their comfort, rather than dragging them through courts and scandal. I couldn't bear to hurt you more, she said simply. You had lost Henry. The children had lost their father. How could I add to that pain? But you've been suffering, Margaret said, gripping Me's hands. All these years, you've been alone and struggling, and we threw away your gifts. We laughed at you. Me's eyes glistened. I know, but I never stopped loving you. Family is everything, even when they forget you. Victoria knelt beside Me's chair. We'll never forget you again. We'll make this right. The inheritance, you'll get what's rightfully yours. The medical treatment, we'll pay for everything. You'll never be alone again. You'll move in with me, Margaret said firmly. Into the mansion, your brother's home, where you should have been all along. Me shook her head gently. Margaret, I don't need... Please, Margaret begged. Please, let us try to make amends. We can never repay what you've sacrificed, but let us try. For a long moment, Me was silent. Then, slowly, she nodded. Not for the money, she said quietly. Not for the house, or the treatment, or any of it, but I would like to not be lonely anymore. I would like to have family again." They all embraced then in that tiny cottage, surrounded by poverty but filled with something they'd lost long ago: genuine love and connection. They cried together, mourned together, and began the slow process of healing. That night, Margaret wouldn't let me stay alone. They bundled her into the car and brought her back to the mansion, installing her in the finest guest room. Christopher called doctors, pulling strings to get appointments with the best oncologists. Victoria sat by Me's bedside, holding her hand and apologizing over and over. In the days that followed, everything changed. Lawyers were consulted, and Me's rightful share of the inheritance was established. But she refused to take it all. "I don't need millions," she insisted. "Just enough for my treatment and a comfortable life. The rest should stay with you. It's built your lives, your children's futures. I won't take that away." Her generosity shamed them further. The treatment was hard. Chemotherapy and radiation that left me weak and sick. But she was never alone. There was always someone with her: Margaret, Christopher, Victoria, or the spouses who had once laughed at her gifts. They took turns reading to her, bringing her favorite foods, sitting with her through long nights. Slowly, the family transformed. The designer clothes and expensive parties seemed less important. They started volunteering at the homeless shelter, understanding for the first time what it meant to struggle. They became less judgmental, more compassionate, more aware of their privilege. Me's cottage was repaired and turned into a community center, a place where struggling families could get food, clothing, and support. Margaret named it Henry's Heart, in honor of her late husband's generosity and Me's sacrifice. Christmas came again. This time, Me was with them, not as the poor relation to be tolerated, but as the beloved heart of the family. She was thinner now, her hair lost to treatment, but her eyes were bright with love and contentment. Under the tree was a simple package wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. It was from Christopher, Victoria, and their spouses. "We wanted to give you something meaningful," Victoria explained, her voice soft. "Something that honored your gifts to us." Inside was a scrapbook filled with letters of apology, of gratitude, of love. Letters from charities they'd supported in her name, letters from families at Henry's Heart, thanking them for their help, and photographs of them all together, smiling, genuine for the first time in years. On the last page was a document, the deed to the mansion, signed over to Me's name. "We can't take this," Margaret said, seeing Me's shocked expression. "This house should have been half yours all along. We've just been taking care of it for you." Me wept then, but they were tears of joy. "Then we'll share it," she said. "All of us. That's what Henry would have wanted, family together, supporting each other, loving each other." The treatment worked better than anyone had dared hope. By spring, Me was in remission. By summer, she was strong enough to work in the garden she'd always dreamed of having, planting roses and vegetables alongside Margaret. They never forgot the lesson of that Christmas gift. Every year, they gathered not just to exchange expensive presents, but to share stories, to remember what mattered, to honor the woman who had given up everything for love. And every year, under the tree, there was at least one gift wrapped in simple brown paper, tied with twine, a reminder that the most precious gifts often come in the humblest packages, that true wealth isn't measured in money, but in love, sacrifice, and the courage to forgive. Mai lived for another 15 years, surrounded by family who cherished her. And when she finally passed, peacefully in her sleep at the age of 83, her funeral was attended by hundreds, not just family, but all the people whose lives she'd touched through her kindness, her generosity, and her quiet strength. At the reception, Victoria stood to speak, her voice steady despite her tears. Aunt Me taught us that poverty isn't about money. It's about the poverty of spirit, of compassion, of love. We were the poor ones, living in our mansion, blind to what truly mattered. She was rich beyond measure, even with nothing to her name, because she had what we'd lost: a generous heart, an unbreakable spirit, and the capacity to love without condition or reservation. She held up a simple ornament, one that Me had made years ago, during one of those lonely Christmases, when she'd saved every penny to give her ungrateful family a gift. It was humble, imperfect, made from scraps and love. This, Victoria said, is more valuable than all the diamonds and designer clothes we ever owned, because it represents something we almost destroyed: the true meaning of family, of sacrifice, of grace. They hung it on the tree that year and every year after. And whenever any of them felt themselves slipping back into old patterns of judgment or pride, they would look at that simple ornament and remember the Christmas gift that had changed their lives forever. The gift of truth, wrapped in brown paper, tied with twine, given by a woman who had every reason to hate them, but chose love instead. In the end, Aunty Me's poverty had been the greatest wealth any of them had ever known, and her humble gifts had been worth more than all the treasures in the world.